Every word spoken, every whisper in the dark, every shadow that lingers just a second too long. It's all part of the story. And now, so are you. The alarm pulled me out of a deep sleep. I reached for my phone, silencing the buzzing before my brain could even register what was happening. The numbers on the screen blinked at me. 6:47 a.m. My body felt heavy, my mind foggy, like I had slept too long or not at all. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, trying to shake the strange feeling pressing at the edges of my thoughts. Something was off. The morning light filtering through the curtains looked flat, almost frozen. The air felt too still, like the apartment had been sealed shut overnight. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stepped onto the cold hardwood. The apartment was quiet. No distant sounds of traffic, no humming pipes, just silence. It was unsettling. A faint metallic smell hung in the air. I walked into the kitchen, half on autopilot, reaching for the coffee maker when my foot slipped on something wet. I barely caught myself against the counter. My breath hitched as I looked down. There was blood. A deep, red stain smeared across the floor, trailing toward the living room. My stomach twisted. I followed the streak with slow, hesitant steps, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then I saw it. My own body. I was lying on my side near the couch, eyes open, blank and unseeing. My throat had been cut. The blood had already dried, dark and clotted against my skin. A sharp ringing filled my ears. My body felt detached, like I was watching this happen to someone else. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I backed away, my legs weak beneath me. A cold wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. And then, everything collapsed. A sudden, crushing force slammed into me, like the entire room had folded in on itself. My vision blurred, my balance gave out, and for a single awful second, it felt like I was falling through nothing. Then I woke up. The alarm buzzed. 6:47 a.m. I shot upright, my chest rising and falling in panicked gasps. My hands clutched the sheets, my pulse hammering so hard I could hear it. I turned toward the living room. No body. No blood. The apartment was exactly the way it had been when I woke up the first time. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers, staring at the time. It hadn't changed. It was 6:47 a.m. again, and I was right back where I started. I didn't move for a long time. The alarm had stopped buzzing, leaving me in silence. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own breathing, uneven and shallow. I turned my head toward the living room. No body, no blood. Everything was exactly as it should be, but I knew what I had seen. I got out of bed slowly, half expecting the floor to feel different beneath my feet. It didn't. I made my way into the kitchen, looking at the spot where my body had been lying just minutes ago, or hours ago, or however long it had been. The floor was clean. No blood. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. This had to be a dream, or a hallucination. Maybe I was sick, or exhausted, or losing my mind. But then my eyes landed on something, a small dark stain on the edge of the counter. I stepped closer. It was a fingerprint, a bloody fingerprint. The nausea returned in a violent wave. My hands shook as I reached for a paper towel, rubbing at the stain. It wouldn't come off. It was real. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Had I seen it before? Had I somehow missed it? No, that wasn't possible. I had been here, standing in this exact spot. It hadn't been there before. The sound of knocking made me jump. I spun toward the front door, my pulse hammering. It had been 3 short knocks. I took a slow step forward, then another. My fingers hovered over the peephole before I finally pressed my eye against it. There was a man standing outside. He looked to be in his 40s, dressed in a wrinkled suit, his hair slightly disheveled. His expression was blank, unreadable. I had never seen him before in my life. I hesitated. Then he knocked again, 3 times, just like before. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped back, trying to keep my breathing steady. That's when I heard a second knock, not from the front door, from inside the apartment. I turned my head slowly, my body frozen in place. The knock had come from the bedroom closet, the same place I had found my body in the last loop. My vision blurred, my chest tightening. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. I wasn't alone. I took a shaky step back. The knocking didn't come again, but the silence was worse. I turned toward the front door. The man outside was still there, and this time he was staring straight into the peephole. I backed away from the door. The man outside wasn't knocking anymore. He just stood there, staring at the peephole, as if he knew I was watching him. I didn't move. I waited. After a long, tense moment, he finally stepped back. Not like a normal person turning to leave, but with perfectly measured steps, his eyes never leaving the door. Then he walked away, disappearing out of view. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but I still wasn't alone. I turned toward the bedroom closet, the spot where the second knock had come from. The door was shut, but the air around it felt wrong, as if something was standing just beyond it, waiting. I took a slow step forward. My stomach was a knot of dread, my hands clammy. I didn't want to open it. I reached for the handle anyway. I counted to 3 in my head. Then I pulled it open. Nothing. Just my clothes hanging neatly inside. No body, no blood, no me staring back. I almost laughed in relief. Almost, because then I noticed something. One of the shirts, the one in the very back, was moving. It wasn't fluttering like there was a draft. It was shifting, like something was pressing against it from the other side. I stumbled back, then something inside the closet breathed. Before I could react, a wave of dizziness crashed over me. My vision blurred. A terrible pressure filled my skull, as if the entire world had tilted sideways. I knew what was happening. The loop was resetting. I barely had time to reach for something to hold on to before everything collapsed inward. The alarm buzzed. 6:47 a.m. I woke up gasping. I shot out of bed before the haze could settle, sprinting toward the living room. My head was spinning, my heart racing. I checked the kitchen counter. The bloody fingerprint was still there. The loop was real. It was keeping some things the same, but only some. I turned to the closet. I knew I wouldn't find anything inside. The loop had already taken care of that, but I did know one thing for certain now. I wasn't alone in the loop, and something inside it was getting closer. I needed to change something. The loop had reset 3 times now, but certain things stayed the same. The bloody fingerprint, the man knocking at my door, and whatever was inside the closet. I wasn't just reliving the same day. The loop was adapting, and that meant I could too. I decided I wouldn't go through the same routine. No shower, no coffee, no checking the door. I needed to break the cycle, even in small ways. I grabbed my keys and threw on a jacket, heading straight for the front door. I hesitated, expecting the knocks, but this time they didn't come. I stepped into the hallway, looking both ways. The man in the suit was gone. I let out a slow breath and started down the stairs. Maybe I could leave. Maybe I could outrun whatever was happening. Then I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Slow, measured. I didn't look back. I picked up my pace, taking the stairs 2 at a time. The faster I moved, the faster the footsteps followed. I reached the lobby. The front door was right there, just a few steps away. Then the glass flickered. For a split second, the world glitched. The door vanished, then reappeared, like a skipping frame in an old film. I stopped in my tracks. The footsteps behind me stopped too. The realization hit me like ice in my veins. The loop wouldn't let me leave. I turned slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. At the top of the stairs, staring down at me, was the man in the suit. But something was different. His face was wrong. The features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they didn't sit right on his skin, like they had been put together in the wrong order. He tilted his head. I couldn't move. Then he spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." A violent pressure slammed into my skull. My vision fractured. The air turned thick and suffocating. The loop was resetting. The note felt heavy in my hands. "Don't open it." I read the words over and over, my mind racing. Open what? I had no memory of writing this note, but I knew for certain that the message came from me. I had left it here in a previous loop. That meant two things. First, I had figured something out before. Second, whatever I had learned, it was bad enough that I had to warn myself. I needed to remember. I checked my apartment for anything unusual. The fingerprint on the counter was still there. The closet was still shut. But something was different. The air felt heavier. I turned toward the window. The blinds were partially open, giving me a view of the street below. A man stood on the sidewalk. At first, I thought it was the man in the suit. But this person was different. They were taller, thinner. Their limbs looked too long, and they stood perfectly still, their head tilted slightly upward, looking directly at my window. My stomach twisted. I stepped back from the blinds, my breath shaky. This was new. Had I triggered something by trying to escape? I grabbed the note again. I needed more clues, something to guide me. I turned it over. There was more writing on the back. One more sentence. If you see him, it's already too late. A sharp knock came from my front door. I froze. It was the same pattern as before. 3 knocks. But this time, something felt different. I walked toward the peephole. The man in the suit was standing there again. But now, his head was tilted back, his face staring directly at the ceiling. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. A deep, throbbing pain filled my skull. A wave of dizziness crashed over me. The world blurred. The alarm buzzed. 6:47 a.m. I gasped awake, my body jolting upright as if I had been electrocuted. I turned to the counter, already knowing what I'd find. The note was still there. This time, there was another message written underneath the first one. 4 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. It knows you remember. I felt a presence behind me. I didn't turn around. I felt it. The presence. The weight of something standing right behind me. Waiting. The apartment was silent, but the air felt alive, charged like the moment before a thunderstorm. Every hair on my body stood on end. I forced myself to breathe, staring at the note in my hand. It knows you remember. That meant whatever was in the loop with me, whatever had been watching me this entire time, had changed its approach. I had triggered something. I gripped the edge of the counter, heart hammering. I needed to think. I needed to. A voice spoke behind me. It was mine. Don't turn around. A cold wave of fear washed over me. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath shuddering. My own voice had just spoken from behind me. I didn't move. I didn't respond. The presence shifted. I could feel it moving closer, its weight pressing against the space behind me, filling the room like an unbearable pressure. Then it spoke again. "You need to see." No, I clenched my fists, shaking my head. The loop was manipulating me, trying to break me down. I swallowed hard. My thoughts raced. If it wanted me to look, that meant I shouldn't. I needed to reset. I took a deep, steadying breath. Then, without thinking, I grabbed the heaviest object I could reach, the coffee mug, and smashed it against my head. A violent crushing pressure swallowed me whole. The alarm buzzed. 6:47 a.m. I woke up with a splitting headache. The reset had worked. The apartment looked normal again, but I could still feel it. That lingering wrongness, like the world wasn't fully stitched back together. I turned to the counter. The note was still there. A new message had been added. I picked it up with trembling hands. "Stop resetting. It doesn't work." A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't written this. This had been left by someone else, and that meant... The knocking started again. Only this time, it came from inside the apartment, from the bedroom closet. I wasn't alone. I stared at the bedroom closet. The knocks had stopped. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin, making it hard to breathe. I knew I couldn't reset again. The note had told me so. Stop resetting. It doesn't work. If I kept resetting, I wasn't fixing anything. I was wasting time. I had to face whatever was inside the closet. I forced my legs to move, every instinct screaming at me to run the other way. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. I counted to 3. Then I pulled it open. The closet wasn't empty. My own body stared back at me. Not like before, not lifeless on the floor. This version of me was standing, wearing the same clothes, breathing, blinking. But something was wrong. His face, it was twisted in a look of pure terror, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, his hands shaking at his sides. He looked just as scared of me as I was of him. His lips moved. "It's you." A jolt of panic shot through me. "What?" I whispered. His breath hitched. His eyes darted behind me. "No," he choked out. "No, no, no. It's too soon." A violent crack echoed through the room. The walls shook. A force ripped through me like a hurricane, a crushing weight wrapping around my entire body. I collapsed, my vision fracturing, and then darkness. I woke up somewhere else, not in my apartment. The floor beneath me was cold concrete. The air smelled like metal and dust. I pushed myself up, my limbs sore, my head pounding. I was in a warehouse, old, abandoned. The ceiling stretched high above me, beams rusted and broken, the windows shattered. Footsteps echoed in the distance. I turned toward the sound, my pulse hammering. A man stood in the shadows, just out of reach of the dim, flickering light. At first, I thought it was the man in the suit, but as he stepped forward, I saw his face. My breath caught in my throat. It was me. Not the scared version from the closet, not the corpse I had found in the first loop. This version was calm, too calm. He tilted his head. "You're finally here." I took a step back. What the hell is happening? His lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "You already know," he said. I shook my head. "No, I don't. I was in my apartment." He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "There is no apartment. There never was." The words slammed into me like a punch to the chest. I took another step back, but the space behind me felt wrong, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. My other self watched me carefully. "I know this part is hard," he said. "It was hard for me too. This is a nightmare," I stammered. "It's a loop, it's a prison." My stomach turned. He stepped closer. "The truth is, "You were never supposed to wake up," he said. "Not after what happened." I swallowed hard. My voice barely came out. What happened? His eyes darkened. "You killed me." The air collapsed inward, and I remembered. Memories crashed into me like a tidal wave. I killed him. No, I killed me. The other me. The version of myself standing in front of me now, calm and knowing, watching as the truth unraveled inside my head. Flashes of something I had long forgotten. No, something the loop had erased, flooded my mind. The warehouse, the fight, the knife in my hand, the blood on the concrete. I staggered back, gripping my head. No, that's not possible. But it was. I remembered it now, all of it. The rage, the fear, the cold realization that I had done something irreversible. I had murdered someone. I had murdered myself. But how? How was that possible? The other me took a slow step forward. "This loop," he said quietly. "It isn't a punishment." My breath hitched. "It's a test." My mind reeled. What? His expression didn't change. "The moment you died, the world didn't know what to do with you." I shook my head. "That doesn't make any sense. I'm still alive." He smiled slightly. "Are you?" The air around us shifted. The warehouse trembled, flickering at the edges, like a dying signal. I looked down at my hands. They were blurring, fading. The realization hit me like a gut punch. I wasn't in a loop. I was in limbo. "You weren't supposed to kill him," the other me said, watching me carefully. "But you did, and now the world can't decide if you should exist." The loop wasn't trying to keep me prisoner. It was trying to figure out where I belonged. A deafening crack tore through the air. The walls split apart, revealing an endless void beyond, stretching in all directions. The loop was ending. The test was almost over. But there was one last question left. "Do you want to live?" the other me asked. I stared at him. "What happens if I say no?" His expression darkened. "Then this is where you stay." I turned toward the void, my mind spinning. Then I looked at him, the version of me that had been waiting here all along. I thought of the blood on the floor, the versions of me I had seen, the fear, the endless resets, and I made my choice. I woke up. The alarm buzzed. 6:47 a.m. But this time, I wasn't in my apartment. I was in a hospital bed. A heart monitor beeped beside me. My body felt weak, like I hadn't moved in days. A nurse stood near the door, looking surprised. "You're awake." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I had survived. Somehow, I had made it through. The loop had decided. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, something gnawed at the back of my mind. One final memory from the warehouse. The last thing the other me had said before everything disappeared. "You made the choice, but you didn't make the right one." My chest tightened. I turned my head toward the hospital window. Outside, standing perfectly still on the sidewalk across the street, was a man in a wrinkled suit, watching, waiting, and then the heart monitor flatlined. The end, or is it?